but I was a co-sponsor, as I think nearly every Republican in the end we backed. Now the reality of the current Congress is that we got creamed in the 2008 election. You know, right now we have a one-party state in Washington where Speaker Pelosi commands the House, Majority Leader Reid commands the Senate by tremendous majorities, and the President is from the Democratic Party. But the great thing about U.S. politics, it's a little bit like being a Cubs fan. There's always the next election. There's always next year. And my feeling is we can make a tremendous change. I will tell you that I try to read as much of the bills as possible. But many times Speaker Pelosi, like yesterday, presents a bill several hundred pages long and schedules a vote only 2 hours later. And so it's nearly impossible. Now I voted against that legislation because we couldn't read it and it was moving very fast. One of the key bills that I read every page of, both the report and the bill, was the stimulus. Speaker Pelosi released the stimulus the day of the President's inauguration. I think some might have hoped that all members of Congress would have gone to a party and not read it. I canceled my plans for that day. I pulled an all-nighter. It was just like when I was in school. And the next morning I issued a 2.5-page memo to all Republicans why the stimulus won't work. I've read every page, and here's what's wrong. And then every Republican voted against the stimulus off that. I think you've got to be very careful with legislation. My general feeling about the direction of the Congress so far is moving way too fast, providing way too much authority to executive agencies that will have consequences that may hurt people later on that no one intended. And I think bringing this to a more considered pace is a better way to go. Anybody else?
Hope. I was wondering what your opinion is on the GED program.
I like the GED program, and I understand you've been a couple of years now. And
7 actually.
7 years? That's great. And I hope you make it.
Yeah, I'm hoping to.
Yep. Yeah.
I just was curious.
You bet. You bet. Who else?
Path that we are going to be forced into with everything from the rumors of taxes on the benefits that our health care pays, just on and on. So many different rules with Nancy Pelosi making comments like, well, we have to pass this to know what's in this.
Right.
Okay. Part of my question is, well, I guess it's what I'm flat out getting at. House and Senate, everybody that's blessed with being able to be elected through however they made it there, why does everybody up there have a guaranteed retirement as soon as they get a hitch done, where us that's supporting everybody up there that works for us, we got to work 30, 40 years to get a good retirement.
Right. Yeah. I think we ought to pare back the government. I could go on and on about various ideas to pare back the government, but one of the most worrying is this health care bill. By the way, I spent a lot of time helping to write the alternative health care bill. Did anybody hear what the Republican bill did? Because it was so tough to get through. Most of the mainstream media would lean to the other side, and so we couldn't get through. Here is the Republican alternative. It was actually about 400 pages long, but I can explain it in 30 seconds. First, the Medical Rights Act that says Congress shall make no law interfering with decisions that you make with your doctor. Second, you cannot have reform in this area without lawsuit reform, critical for the state of Illinois. And third, Congress should protect your right to buy health insurance from any state in the union if you find a plan less expensive for your family. That's what we stood for. What we are against was this health care bill that made $500 billion in cuts to Medicare. That this health care bill, which had several hundred directions to the executive branch to make up new regulations, and we have no idea what those regulations would say. And third, starting in 2014, begins to offer these government exchange health care plans, and says that if an employer wants to dump coverage for their employees, they merely need to pay a $900 fine. And we worry that millions of Americans then will be dropped from their coverage into whatever the government and its contractors are offering, breaking a fundamental pledge that was made to us at the start of this debate. Remember when they said, if you have your health insurance, you'll be allowed to keep it? Just about every analysis now done shows that's likely not to be the case. So I voted against the health care bill twice, both in the House and its final form. And I still think we ought to have had the other reforms. Illinois just struck down its medical malpractice reform, and access to care is critical here. There's one other problem, and I'm sure it's the case in many Illinois communities. I know it's the case in Decatur, for example, and others. The hospital is generally the #1 employer in many communities in Illinois. I have now visited a number of communities, for example in Decatur and Alton, etc., where they said that the cuts made to Medicare in this legislation will require the hospital to stop hiring or to lay off staff and stop all of their expansion programs. And so not only do we see the problems to our own health care being created by this law, but we're also seeing the #1 employers in many Illinois communities beginning to contract because of the details of this legislation. So, anybody else?